Your pooch belly might not be made up of just belly fat, and it may have a lot more to do with your posture than you realize. A pooch belly tends to be present in a specific type of posture that I commonly see, and this is something that we can work on. What this tells me is two things. Usually, first and foremost, that the sternum is in a depressed position. You can feel this on yourself. If you just stand tall and then just let your shoulders come forward, you can see and feel what that does to your lower abdomen. Now, this can occur in the presence of either an anterior pelvic tilt or a posterior pelvic tilt. It doesn't have to be just one or the other, but the key theme is that the pelvis is being pushed forward with the sternum underneath us and depressed. You can see what that would do to the contents of my lower abdomen. So the thing is that because these people are constantly in a position like this to some extent with their pelvis forward, they have no ability to properly use their diaphragm, to properly expand their rib cage, and to not just breathe into their belly, because that's what a lot of these people are going to want to do. If your rib cage is compressed and that's where your lungs are, then you have to find a different area to create that expansion. There's a lot of research to suggest that if you stop breathing well, you die. So the goal is two things. First and foremost, to be able to get us to open up these front ribs. That will allow us to naturally get a little taller. We can do some exercises to help you stand up straighter, whatever that means. Or we can give you the ability and your rib cage the awareness to expand 20,000 times a day or more with each and every breath. That's so much better than just stretching certain muscles for a couple minutes at a time. We want to create real meaningful change. If this is making sense to you and you've never really considered this before, please do me a huge favor and smash that thumbs up button. It would do a lot for me in the channel and the algorithm. Now remember, we need to expand the front ribs and not as much the belly in this context. We're going to do something that's a little bit more inverted within our posture. Imagine this Gatorade bottle was the contents of my upper body. If this is my head and this is my pelvis, invert myself so where my pelvis is higher than my head, the contents of my thorax are going to go forward and up. So now when I breathe in, I will have an easier opportunity getting expansion of those front upper ribs and less so of a bias of expanding my belly or near my pelvis. This is why an inverted position is so helpful. What we're going to do to get into this position to really maximize the expansion of the upper ribs is get on a bench or some sort of firm surface that's not really going to move on us too much. And we're going to place our knees on it with them very slightly bent. Now you could have your feet in the air or just resting your shins on that thing, whatever is comfortable for you. But the key is we need to have our forearms flat on the ground underneath our shoulders, and we have our head in a nice relaxed position to where we're not going to risk engaging our neck whatsoever. Now the other key here is the position of the spine and the ribs relative to the head. So even though he's in an inverted position, Trevor still has some length through his spine. We do not want to have flaring through the rib cage like that. We do not want to have rounding through the rib cage like that. So think about getting long through your spine, but then getting a nice full exhale. Sigh the air out. Soft exhale is going to get those ribs to come down into a position that will facilitate a nice exhale. So at the end of a nice 5 to 8 sighing exhale, 5 to 8 second sighing exhale, Trevor's going to feel a little bit of side abs engage. And he's going to close his mouth, put his tongue on the roof of his mouth, and he's going to silently inhale through his nose. I should not hear you inhale at all. Slow and long is always better than harder and more forceful. And as you do that, you should feel some expansion in your upper rib cage, in the front and the back too a little bit. And then you're just going to sit here and do this for sets of about 5 to 10 breaths. If you don't have a bench or you felt uncomfortable being in a significantly inverted position, you could regress that to something like this, where you have a couple of steps or just a bunch of stuff stacked up that's stable. And now you can still have your forearms flat on the floor. You can still have your pelvis above the level of your head. And even if you wanted to go lower than that, like I'll have Trevor step off really quick. I'll pull one of these out. You could even do this, whatever's comfortable for you, but generally speaking, the more inverted you are, the more successful it will be, but maybe you want to build up to that starting with something like this. Just make sure, again, you have that nice neutral position in your spine, you're not arched and your ribs aren't flaring, nor is your sternum depressing. The other thing we need to make sure we do, because we can't address just here and forget about what's happening here, because this is driving it too. We need to be able to bring the pelvis and the center of mass back underneath us more. So that way, when we stand, we're not pushing ourselves onto our forefoot as much. We need to be able to get nice and stacked with our head over our rib cage, over our pelvis. And the best way to do that is to find our heels better and to create an awareness of our hamstrings, which are muscles on the back side of the pelvis, to pull the pelvis back and underneath us. That would be very helpful. So here's an exercise that you can do for that. For this, we need to get in this hook lying position, meaning that we have our feet on a foam roller, or we'll talk about alternatives later, and our heels are the thing that's in contact with it. And our feet are hip width apart, toes straight ahead, with about this much knee and hip bend. Now, we're going to initiate this exercise by simply just pressing our heels into that foam roller and performing a slight posterior pelvic tilt. So imagine that your low back is staying in contact with the ground for the most part, but your pelvis is lifting off of the ground. Another way to think about it would be, imagine that your spine is a strip of Velcro and you're peeling one vertebrae at a time off of the ground till where it feels like your pelvis is tucked underneath yourself a little bit. So your tailbone's off of the ground, but your low back is pretty flat. You're gonna feel some hamstrings engage fairly significantly when this happens. Now we're gonna reach for the ceiling, and all we're gonna do is slowly, very slowly go back until we feel like our rib cage is about to start flaring. Not to the point where it does flare, you wanna stop before that. And it's gonna vary depending on the individual, how far overhead they can go. So for Trevor, let's see, right about there. He would probably flare if he went any further beyond that. You don't wanna flare. Now Trevor is going to feel his hamstrings, keep a gentle reach, and exhale fully. He's gonna get all the air out, feel a little bit of side ab tension, and then he's gonna close his mouth, put his tongue on the roof of his mouth. He's gonna slowly inhale, not shrugging his shoulders when he inhales, not engaging his neck. It's a chill reach, it's a chill inhale. If you feel any neck tension whatsoever, you are probably inhaling too strong or too fast. You need to chill out and make sure you go slow, which is always better than going harder and more forceful. So it's imperative to understand that we want the hamstrings working here, not the glutes. It's very important we only feel hamstrings. If you're feeling your glutes engage, you need to get them to relax. So have the intention of focusing on keeping them relaxed and focus on your heels to create that little tilt of your pelvis. If you still can't keep your glutes relaxed, take something compressible like a ball, put it in between your mid-thigh, squeeze it just about a 3 to 5 out of 10, depending on what you would individually need, and then focus on those heels, and you should be able to get more hamstrings and a whole lot less glutes, and just go through the same exact thing. Now let me make it very, very clear that a pooch belly is a completely normal thing, and there's nothing inherently wrong with it. There are millions, billions of people potentially that have some degree of a pooch belly. It's predominantly common in females, but males can absolutely have it. And it isn't something that you have to fix. It isn't something that is unattractive. It's not something that I feel like you need to spend a lot of mental energy worrying about. But it can be associated with certain postures and movement limitations and breathing dysfunctions, which is the main concern that I have. I don't really care what you look like. I care that you move and feel good. And if you're in this presentation that I'm discussing here, that can limit your ability to do those things. So that's why I'm okay addressing it in this video.